Welcome into K-State Online. I am Mason Voth. That is Drew Galloway, and KSU Fan is here with us as well. It is our first show of the new year, and we have a lot to kind of dive into today. But, you know what I'm going to say, Drew? Or do you have your fact ready? I better check on you with that first.
I'm dialed in now.
Okay, all right.
I actually did not know what you were going to say.
Okay, all right. Well, now you know.
That's why I gave you a look of.
Now you know what's coming. Get your fact ready. And I just want everybody to know out there, yes, is this technically still the holiday season? Look, for me, the holiday season does not end until I get to go to Grandma Karen's house for Christmas. And because I'm not going to say it because she might watch this and she would not take it as a joke and her feelings would get hurt. So what I was going to say was she selfishly got COVID the day before we all came up for Christmas, but I'm not going to say that. And I don't think that, nothing you can do, Grandma. You'll be fine. We'll enjoy it. We'll have a great time when we get there. So the holiday season is still here, believe it or not. And it's time to find the perfect gift for the Cats fan in your life. Give your friends and family the trip of a lifetime to see the Wildcats take on the Cyclones in the 2025 Aer Lingus College Football Classic in Dublin, Ireland. Visit cats2ireland.com for information on official travel and hospitality packages. That's cats, the number 2, Ireland.com. All right, Ireland fun fact time, Drew.
All right, so Ireland has the highest percentage of red-haired people in the world, 10% of the population.
I don't know that I needed your fun fact to tell me that. I think that was probably an assumed thing, but yes, that's good to get confirmation to a stereotype.
10% is a lot.
It's a high number. I mean, what are some other things in daily life that 10% is like a commonality of? Like, I mean, are there even 10% of people left-handed in the U.S.? Like,
I don't think so.
I'm gonna look it up. This will be a left-handed fun fact. Ooh, look at that. About 10.9% of the U.S. population is left-handed. So it is basically like being left-handed. So having red hair in Ireland is like being left-handed, which then does kind of make, the red hair stereotype seem a little bit more wrong and not friendly because you don't walk around and just go, oh, American must be left-handed, So I'll take it easy on the red hair because, a lot of lefties. Also, I do wonder how they judge left-handed counters in this population, because do you count somebody that does things with their right hand, like writing, but also will like swing things with their left hand, or like vice versa? How does that work? That's what I would be interested in, because like I've got a dad and a brother that they throw right-handed, but they swing a baseball bat and golf club left-handed. And oddly enough, I've got a cousin who throws left-handed, but swings right-handed. Oh. So I don't know how you count those people. I guess we just put them on their own island and kick them out of society for being weird. Today, we're going to talk about K-State football and basketball, because football obviously wrapped up their season last week. So we'll get into kind of the 2024 big picture recap, look ahead to 2025 and some of the expectations there. We are going to draft our favorite plays of the 2024 season. So we'll probably get 3 apiece there, just because in a 9-win season, I don't know that there were that many plays that we go, man, those were fun to think back on. But we will talk about that. And then we will get into basketball to kind of start things off here, because K-State shocked the world. They are 1-0 in Big 12 play. What is next, Drew Galloway? What is next is TCU this weekend on Saturday, and that's a big one for K-State. So let's just jump on into it. The Cats, after a terrible non-con, go 6-5 in non-conference play. They get into conference play. A lot of people, myself included, were like, Cincinnati's only a 3.5-point favorite. Drew was so worried about what the Bearcats were going to do to K-State, he didn't even show up. He didn't want the embarrassment of facing his great Cincinnati fears. And at the end of the day, as we knew, Cincinnati had a lot to be fearful of getting into Big 12 play, because they are the frauds, it turns out, as K-State gets a 70-67 win over the Bearcats. Easily the best win of the season so far for K-State. Fan, you and I were there. What was your overarching takeaway from that game and what it means moving forward, if anything?
Yeah, my One of my mantras in basketball for ever since I've been a fan has been it's about players, not plays. And K-State finally had a game where the best players were their best players. And, we talked about that a little bit during the game. When you have Coleman Hawkins making shots and doing the other things he does well, and then Doug McDaniel's making shots, especially getting to the rim and making shots around the rim, even though he didn't have a great assist night and his assist to turnover ratio wasn't the best. Those two led the team in scoring. Those two were the most dynamic players. And then other guys could just make plays around them. You had David Gasson doing his normal, kind of being the third wheel. Second wheel is probably his maximum, but you don't want him to be your best player. Then you had the Joneses kind of fitting the role maybe we thought they would. And then, even though, that the good thing is, like I said, you didn't get your best point guard type game from Doug McDaniel, and you didn't get your best game from Brendan Housen, only going 1 for 8 from 3. But regardless, the key was your two best players were your two best players. And then the other side is K-State was locked in on defense, which we hadn't always seen this year. And you hold Cincinnati to 0.98 points per possession or something like that, which is the best game against a good opponent they've had this season. Everybody else has scored 1.03 or better. And that's how you win a game. And, the nice thing was I think Cincinnati led for 24 total seconds during the game. K-State pretty much controlled it. Cincy did it push a few times and make some runs. But I was also pleased with how K-State always answered every time Cincinnati made a run. So lots of good things. But again, it's just one game. This team still has a lot of prove it in them. And like we've talked about, because of the 6-5 non-conference and already having 4 quad 2 losses, they have zero room for error. So they have to pretty much win every game they need to win and from here on out. And they really can't lose a bad one. So that's the downside. But again, my decision at the time was I'm going to enjoy this for at least a couple of days, and then we'll worry about the future when we get there.
Are you worrying about the future right now? Or are you still enjoying the Cincinnati game?
I'm starting to think about the next two. You got your 2 easiest road games of the year, and you don't want to say must win in early January, but you might have 2 games coming up that are must win, even though they're on the road in the Big 12.
Well,
which is not easy.
I will be transparent. If they had lost to Cincinnati, I would have started angling to DY. Hey, does it really make sense for me to drive down to Stillwater on Tuesday? Do you think that's that? But now all of a sudden it's like I just had to map out my entire month to my wife yesterday, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to have a free Saturday, and I'm going to be taken up with these days and these days of. So it is, it's a fine line that K-State is going to ride here for a while, and in some ways, it is going to mimic probably what the 2022 season ended up looking like in the last year of Bruce, where K-State not as many losses in non-con, but they got into conference play and they started with 4 straight losses. And some of those, you lose 3 of them by 4 points or less to OU, West Virginia, and TCU. Then they got a couple of wins, a few more losses, but they were kind of keeping it interesting. And even when they, after they had beaten West Virginia, they were 14-11 and 6-7 in Big 12 play. Like they were still legitimately on the bubble, according to the experts, because of how strong their schedule and their resume was because of it. And then obviously they didn't win again after that West Virginia game. And it was spurred on by a heartbreaking overtime loss to O State. They lost by 1 to Iowa State. Just a lot of tough losses mixed in there. We all remember Texas Tech. Was it a foul or not? So that's kind of what this team is going to play, except, that K-State team in an 18-game season in 2022 probably needed to just go like 9-9, and they maybe would have been in. Looking at what that would have done for them, 9-9 would have made them 17-12 and 9-9 in the Big 12. That's probably good. This K-State team, I keep bringing up the precedent of it, but no team with more than 14 losses has ever gotten an at-large. This team basically has to go 12-8 in the Big 12 this season because of it. So if you're looking at the schedule, because you talk about the games you have to take care of, this is this is normal anyways in Big 12 basketball, is picking out the games that you absolutely can't lose. It's even more important, though, for K-State and the circumstances of their season. If we're trying to paint the picture of you cannot lose this game if you want to make this crazy dream a reality, what games remaining, Drew, are the ones that cannot be lost by K-State? Because Cincinnati on Monday was one of those games they took care of business.
Yeah, if you're painting out the picture of to get to 12-8, what do you have to do? You probably have to win. You definitely have to win at least one of these next two, if not both. And then you probably have to win at Utah. And then you have to beat Arizona State at least once. So, I mean, you kind of paint that picture. And this is why the non-conference was so frustrating, because we laid it out when the Big 12 schedule came out. The Big 12 schedule for K-State is pretty favorable. I mean, you get Houston once, and it's at home. You get Arizona once, and it's at home. You get Texas Tech once, and it's at home. So you kind of like look at these, and you're like, okay, you could paint the picture before the season even started that K-State had that unbalanced schedule that would allow them to be near the top of the Big 12 if they really kind of clicked at the beginning of the season. Now you're looking at the schedule as, okay, are there 12 wins left? And as somebody that was extremely, extremely down on how things had been going, now it's like, okay, they've proven that they can beat Cincinnati. If they can beat TCU or Oklahoma State, I think that there's a path to 12. And I think that that's kind of the fun thing when you look at it, because the schedule is so favorable for a Big 12 schedule for K-State. But you kind of look at these games now, and especially these next two, as if you aren't at least 2-1 when you go back home and face Houston on the 11th, your season is probably over.
Yeah, I think that the way to look at this is I have the next 4 games down on the screen right now if you're watching on the YouTube. At TCU, at OSU, Houston, and Texas Tech at home. The way this season is going to play out until we can pretty easily come up with the idea that K-State doesn't have any chance anymore is you're going to take this by chunks and say, over this stretch, what does K-State need to do to be able to get in? And I say this too because as down as I was, and I'm still not fully out of it on this team, because again, there's the conversation. Jerome Tang said it to me after the Wichita State game. He said it was 2 games. Well, it was 1 game against Cincinnati. So like we still have to see more from this team to think that, okay, things are magically fixed now. But the talent is still here on this team. Like, you know, it was Chora is not here, but he wasn't doing anything anyways when he was on the roster. The other guys that we thought were going to play a role in this team being a good team this year are still here. And there are a lot of these pieces where I'm not as overly concerned about some of the stuff. Like they just have to produce better. Like Brendan Hasen's been fine for the most part. But you think of like Max Jones and CJ Jones, like they got to get stronger. And that should happen in theory because they're getting more and more used to playing in the Big 12 as opposed to, you know, in the Big West or the Missouri Valley. You think about, speaking of the Missouri Valley, UIC beat Drake yesterday. So Drake no longer unbeaten. And CJ Jones, ironically, would have beaten Drake if he had stayed at UIC this year. But nonetheless, but like this team has the talent still. So it's like when it seems very non-committal after the Wichita State game or some of these other games where I say, you know, there's a world out there where this happens. I say that for a reason, because that is the accurate way to try and depict what this K-State team can do. Because while unlikely, and you've shrunk your margin for error, a lot of the pieces that we thought were still going to make a really good team are here. And I think a lot of the things that make them a better team are not things that they need to improve on with their skill basketball-wise. At least, you know, Coleman Hawkins doesn't need to learn how to pass the basketball. He knows how to do that. He's proven over the years he also knows how to put the ball in the hole. He's just got to shoot it better. Doug McDaniel, you know, that's the one area where you go, you got to find a way to keep yourself on the floor. But it should encourage K-State fans that it seems like Jerome Tang with how they played the game against Cincinnati, said, you know what? Screw it. Like, we have to win games here. And Doug McDaniel, when he's right, gives us our best chance. We got to put him out there and see if it happens. And everybody involved was rewarded for that. So that's the opportunity that's here for K-State. So, Fan, I'll ask you this. If we're taking this by chunks at a time, and I think that this is a good chunk to look at, these next 4 games, because after this, then it's back-to-back road games at KU and Baylor. The chances of winning both or even one of those is likely very slim. Over the next 4, if you think K-State is still trying to make this miraculous run to sneak into the NCAA tournament, what does the record have to be after these 4 games?
At least 2-2, and I think ideally you'd want to get to 3-1, just because you have the Houston Texas Tech games at home. Houston is going to be the roughest one, the toughest one probably. Texas Tech looks vulnerable after losing at home to UCF, so those are the 2 you'd want to get. TCU and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State looks like the worst team in the league. Like, everybody would want to say us, but I think Oklahoma State is definitely that. And TCU is not very good. So even though they didn't play poorly this weekend.
But is Arizona good? Arizona
might be bad.
A higher, I don't know. They're kind of like K-State, just even in a different world, because Arizona's,
that's true,
not coming off such a terrible season last year.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There are question marks throughout this league right now,
and they lost their center too as well, so they know he's gone for the season. So, yeah, I would just 2-2 would be minimum. I really think they almost need to go 3-1. I think, it's like a lot of people do with the NFL, or they used to with the 4 games, break them into 4-game chunks. You can almost do that with the Big 12 and break them into 4 5-game chunks. You've got to go 3-2 in each one of those chunks minimum. And this looks like a chunk where you should be able to go 4-1. So that's the issue. That's the way I'm kind of looking at it right now.
If we look at the first 9 games of Big 12 play this year for K-State, it is Cincinnati at home. They already have the win. At TCU, at Oklahoma State, Houston, Texas Tech, at KU, at Baylor, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State. I stop it at that 9, and I'll explain why in a second. So if you look at those, to me, I think they need to be 6-3 over the course of that stretch. You can pick which game you lose. If you win any of those 6, I think you're okay. Really, though, you probably can't lose to Oklahoma State because that would damage the resume even more. And I think if you're a 14-loss team that already has losses to LSU, Drake, and Wichita State, and Liberty, you're going to have all those on there. And then you throw on, well, they also lost to Oklahoma State. You start to go, yeah, I can't get behind that. But if they lose to any combination of TCU, Houston, Tech, KU, Baylor, even maybe West Virginia at this point, but that's a home game. You don't want to lose it, whatever. But you're 6-3 there. And then you hit, once February comes, that will be the defining stretch of K-State's season, because you're going to have some massive opportunities immediately in front of you, mixed in with a game that you really can't lose, even though it's on the road. So they'll play at Iowa State. Then a couple days later, they're on the road at Arizona State. They return home for the game against KU. And then a couple days later, Arizona comes to Manhattan before they head out for their Utah road trip. And then really, once you get past that Arizona game at home, there's really only 2 games left on the schedule there that if you're going to be a tournament team, that you would think we're going to have a battle here. Like that's 50-50. The others you should win. It's going to be Cincinnati and Iowa State at the end of the year. But K-State almost has to guarantee themselves right now that they can win that KU game at home too. Like, that feels like that is going to be one of the turning points in this entire thing. And I already mentioned the 2022 team, but you think about 2022 and how things were going and just how pivotal it feels like that loss to KU was at home. I mean, Nigel Pack has the game of his life. I mean, that would have been an all-time performance in K-State basketball. If Nigel Pack has 35, he drains all those threes, and you take down KU like they were trending, and then Ochai Agbaji happened. But that kind of spun into a couple more losses, because I think at that point that demoralized K-State. It was They dropped to 2-5. Then they then went on the road, got blown out by Baylor. They went on the road and lost to an Ole Miss team that you would have thought you could probably win this one, before they kind of recovered and I think found their pride. And then another heartbreaking loss in overtime in Stillwater later in the year broke their spirits again. And they just kind of had heartbreaker after heartbreaker. I think that KU game will end up being pivotal because it's going to be a good win for you. It's one that you feel like you're stealing against a team that you should not beat, and you're going to be at home. You've gotten it the last 2 years, and you think even back to Bruce, like bad K-State teams, Bruce somehow found a way to beat KU. I think that's probably going to be the significant one there.
I'll add in that I know that you said that KU is probably a team that K-State shouldn't beat, but after watching them play West Virginia, that is a vulnerable team if shots aren't falling. And they are kind of like the exact same team as they were last year. And I said that while we were all watching the West Virginia KU game, is that KU is the same team as they were last year, which is why I had like the big beef with like, why is KU ranked so high in the preseason, but K-State was in like that 30 range, because there wasn't a lot of differences between them. So you can steal that one, and then you gotta go 1-1 against Iowa State and somehow find a split. And then you look down the stretch, you have to beat Utah on the road like that. Oklahoma State is probably the worst team in the league, but Utah is probably 15. You have to beat TCU probably if you're going to make the tournament, because that's just a road environment that they're going to be like probably half full on Saturday at TCU. We all know what the crowd looks like when K-State goes to Stillwater. I wonder if that continues again. So there are opportunities on the road where K-State can steal some of these games to try and get to that 12-8. And I think that the scary thing now is that you have like this hope to cling on to, because that was the best game that they'd played all year to open Big 12 play against Cincinnati. And I think that they still have a lot of room to grow. I will point out that I do have a little bit of concern about how the offenses ran. Like, it just seemed like against Cincinnati that if they didn't get out in transition, that they were going to have to run something late in the shot clock, and it probably wasn't going to be a great look, and they were going to have to kind of settle for something. I mean, it went in, so it didn't matter. But that timeout possession when K-State was only up like 3, I think, near the end of the game, and then Max Jones just hits a fadeaway 2-point jumper
off the glass.
Yeah, I don't think that was what was called.
Real quick, you mentioned Utah and Oklahoma State. Remember, we played a game a while back. Which bald coach is which? Drew, can you tell me who is Steve Lutz and who is Craig Smith? So here is bald coach number 1 and bald coach number 2. Again, bald coach 1, bald coach 2. Which one is the head coach of Utah and which one's the head coach of Oklahoma State?
Lutz has got to be 2, because that looked like a Western Kentucky sweatshirt.
Okay, well, it could have been a Utah one.
I mean, it could have, but I couldn't tell you the last time Utah was in the NCAA tournament.
It's probably been about 5 years. So, yeah, okay, good call. Well, that is Steve Lutz. Bald coach number 2 is Steve Lutz, the head coach of the Cowboys, and Craig Smith is bald coach number 1, the coach of the Utes. So, good job. You know your bald coaches in the Big 12.
But I just have some kind of trepidations with how the offense looks when K-State isn't getting out and running right now, which has kind of been kind of the story of the season, is that the offense is still really clunky at times. It doesn't really have the sense of direction. But if they can defend how they defended against Cincinnati, I think that the offense will find enough, because, you know, you kind of look at this, and some people will probably laugh when I say this. There are going to be more games than not that K-State has at least the second best player on the floor in Coleman Hawkins. And I think that is a good enough thing that it can kind of get you over the hump in some of these games that are toss-ups.
And back to your point on the offense, I think as Mason, we talked about toward the end of the game, when K-State went into kind of take the air of the ball mode and let's use 30 seconds of clock. And then that was when the offense went nowhere. Like you're right, Drew. Like I thought most that second half when they were moving the ball and trying to play fast was when K-State was at its best. And really the last 2 years when K-State's gone into milk the clock mode on offense, they have not been very good. They weren't very good last year with Tyler Perry at point guard trying to do that. And then they weren't very good in this game with Doug McDaniels really not having a very good passing game for him. Probably the best passers were the Joneses and Coleman Hawkins in this game, not Doug McDaniels. So, and actually even though he was 1 for 8, Brendan Housen did have 4 assists in that game. So he made a couple decent passes too. So yeah, it was not good when they went into that mode. And that's something they've got to figure out because they're just not built really to be a possession team. They've got to run and score in transition. And you're right, Drew, that offense is very clunky when it isn't moving.
Well, and one of the things that I think needs to happen, I think this team needs to kind of correct the shots that they're taking. Brendan Haasen would be the one that I had the biggest gripe with. Like, everybody knows I love shooters. I love the style that can come with Brendan Haasen's game. But I think when you get guys into a little bit of a new role and they think that they have to do something versus I can do something, you get mixed results. And right now he's in the position where he thinks that he has to do something versus I can do this. So like he can jack that shot with 27 seconds on the shot clock in transition, but only do it if you got your feet in the right position and you catch the ball clean, because there were a lot of times where the ball was not caught clean. And instead of, an actual catch and shoot, he was kind of not doing the catch part. It was kind of a tap and shoot. Like he got it and it was, being guided out of his hands. I think that's the one thing that needs to be corrected. There were a couple of other times throughout the game where guys took shots. I thought you weren't really ready to shoot the basketball there, but you thought this is a situation where I have to shoot the basketball. That's the one thing where I think they could improve a little. And I think if that happens, then, I think Brendan Haasen's, instead of being 1 of 8 from 3 against Cincinnati, I think he's probably like 2 of 5 or 3 of 7 or something. And we're talking about it a little bit differently. So that's the one thing that they probably need to correct a little bit there as well. But we'll see if they do against Oklahoma State. I mean, or TCU. Look at me already looking past the Frogs. That's my bad. Hand up on that one. If I'm getting credit for the win over Cincinnati, I now take credit for the loss to TCU for looking over the Horned Frogs. So that one is on me. I apologize.
It's a big legacy game for you as a Jamie Dixon hater.
That's true. I mean, this is kind of make or break for Jamie Dixon. TCU has never finished better than 500 in Big 12 play since joining the league. Losses to K-State certainly would help the cause moving forward. Last thing on basketball before we dive into things, because we've already talked about the next couple teams coming up. They're gettable. Oklahoma State, obviously. TCU, they're banged up. They've lost guys already for the year. I don't even know that they were going to be that good to begin with. What did you guys make of Jerome Tang's post-game press conference on Monday night and his decision to start Doug McDaniel? Because while certainly odd in the way that he got to it, and it was a long answer. I mean, a lot of people probably thought it was me talking on a podcast up there just rambling. But basically explaining his decision to start Doug McDaniel, I thought of it as a guy that was obviously, we know how Jerome Tang lives his life. And I was explaining to people, like, you translate things that you see in everyday life to other parts of your life, and it guides you. And it really shouldn't matter how Tang was guided to a spot if it ended up proving him right. Like, to the same extent, this is kind of like how he coached Marquise Noel in that first year, where it was basically like, I think he had said he had heard a sermon about, like, you kind of got to let your shooters kind of let their arrows go or whatever. And I think he came to realize that, and it worked out with Marquise Noel. Well, his decision, like, undeserved privilege, basically the overarching theme of what he said, it played out and worked out well for him with Doug McDaniel. And I think while some don't like the way that he answered why Doug McDaniel started, it's the exact same thing that a bunch of fans have been calling for is we don't care if this guy is not doing the right things, but there's a chance that he can do the right things on the floor, and he's probably the most or the second most talented dude on your roster. You have to play him if you want any chance to win. And so it doesn't matter to me how Jerome Tang came to that decision. It's that he came to it and it worked out. And I think people are making a bigger deal out of how Jerome Tang talked about it than he did. And look, coaches say things that fans hate all the time. Bruce Weber obviously did it. Chris Kleiman, I think he's been almost as clean at the podium as a lot of coaches, and yet, people still wanted to crucify him after the Iowa State game with what he said. Jerome Tang is no different. There are a lot of – look, I talked to Alec Bussey quite a bit. He sends me texts frequently about a certain Iowa State coach that he says, if this guy was my coach, the fan base would be losing their minds about the way he talks about things. And I'll let you decide which coach it is of whatever school it is that he covers now that would be about. So what did you guys make of Jerome Tang post-game against Cincinnati and everything that went into it? His decision about playing Doug McDaniel and some of the other things that he had to say as well.
Yeah, I just think that that's kind of who Jerome Tang is. I mean, he is open and transparent in media settings, which is really refreshing.
Most of the time.
Yes, most of the time. And you kind of don't know what he's going to say sometimes, which makes it kind of a fun, like, where is this going? So that was kind of fun to see, like the transparency and openness of like, this is kind of what went into it. And the other thing is like, he's not exactly wrong in what he said. Like, what has Doug McDaniel done on and off the court up until Monday night that you're like, yep, you got to start this guy? I mean, he was effectively benched in a few games already this year and was suspended for another one. So you kind of like look at this as he's not wrong in what he said. Did he kind of go about it in a roundabout way? Probably. But I'm also of the opinion that I want coaches to be up there and be honest with themselves and be honest with everybody else, because he could have been like, yep, this was my plan all along. And it worked out. But I like that he kind of admitted that there was a risk going into it, and kind of that he was a little bit anxious and nervous about how it was going to go. Because, I mean, I think that everybody kind of felt that way when they saw that Doug McDaniel was going to be starting, because like Jerome Tang said, he probably hadn't deserved it. But he played really well against Cincinnati, and you have to think that he's going to be starting going forward. So I think that it was a good thing. Another thing that I thought was fun was Mason getting a shout out during the press conference. When Mason unpromptedly goes, Jerome Tang thanked me in the press conference, and me not being there, my first thought is, oh, he 100% was like, yep, you guys said that we weren't going to win a game the rest of the season. Like, thanks for the motivation. No, but it was actually like, it was Mason's advice about like, why not keep the lineup, and that was coming back.
No, it was about, it wasn't even necessarily about that. It was just the second halves in general against Wichita State and St. John's. Yeah, that was unexpected to say the least. Cause I just thought that was kind of one of those, you throw off or whatever. But yeah, I had asked after the Wichita State game, you had 4-point leads at the half against St. John's and Wichita State. And then 2 times in 3 weeks, those end up turning into 20-point losses. Like, how does that happen? And I mean, how ironic is it that for K-State, the very first game of Big 12 play, a similar scenario, what they were up 2 points at halftime against Cincinnati. So you're in that same spot where we've seen this movie before. Who cares about how good the first half was? We know what the next 20 minutes might look like. And to their credit, they came out and they held Cincinnati off. Even when Cincinnati would tie the game, they were able to push it back up and do what they needed to do to win. And Cincinnati even took the lead for like 40 seconds in there, and K-State managed pretty well. So, yeah, he said, whatever he went down there. And then I did go up to him afterwards after we were done in there and I wanted to make it clear to him too, like, this was not me trying to go after you. Like I don't dislike you. Like I don't want him having that thought process. Just this understanding of like he has his job, I have mine. We both have ways to go about it, and he also had to be transparent there. And like he said in his answer after Monday, basically was like, I didn't have an answer for you in the moment. I didn't know what to do. And so we're good on that. And yeah, I was not expecting that. And it came after, I just asked a question about if he thought the team felt different when they got back from Christmas, which I also thought was a pretty good answer by him. Was, I phrased it as, I may know the answer because of how you answered about Doug, basically saying Doug didn't deserve it. And there was nothing different about Doug when he came back, but he started anyways. But I asked if there was just a different energy or something about the team when they got back from Christmas. And he explained that the team wanted to come back a day later on the 27th. And he had told us after the Wichita State game that the team would be back on the 26th. But he had told them that going into that last week before Christmas, if you win 2 games, you can come back on the 27th. They obviously lost both of them. And so the players who wanted to come back on the 27th, it was going to be the 26th. And then Jerome Tang just says, like, I don't think they were ready to come back. I don't think I was ready to come back. And the most important thing that he said was, it was more important for these guys to know that I cared about them than I did basketball. And I think there are certain teams and times where that is required. And maybe for this team, and again, it's only 1 game, so we'll see if this ends up being the correct approach. But, I kind of thought this was a team that needed to have, get smacked in the face by their coach every once in a while. Again, that is proverbially speaking, not great, not allegedly a coach with the name of Greg that was once in Sedgwick County speaking. By the way, real quick, Sedgwick County coaches, wild experience for me on Christmas Eve. We are driving back from my parents' house and we stop. I'm going to go into Quick Trip and get my wife a drink. So I go in there, not an alcoholic drink. She's pregnant. A warm drink from whatever, which by the way, QT, you royally screwed that up. She disliked it immensely. I go in there and I'm getting the drink. I'm coming up to the register and there's a guy at the register and he's talking and I'm like, man, I know that voice. And I look at him and he's decked out in Under Armour stuff. And then I piece together, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's Isaac Brown. That's the Wichita State coach that got fired, so they could end up hiring Paul Mills. It was so weird because then, I'm not going to go too far into it, but he was buying some things. I was like, Christmas Eve and a guy that was a Division I basketball coach still in town, and that's what he's buying. Like, it was very odd to me to see it. I was taken aback by that experience. I was like, holy cow, I told my wife when I got in the car, she could care less. She was like, I don't know why you're fascinated by that. But anyways, back to K-State and Jerome Tang. I think that there needs to be a balance with how you treat your guys. And I do think that, like, in that moment, after the Wichita State game, and you have all that time off, like, most of those guys, I assume, are going home and thinking, man, we really suck. Like, they're probably aware of it. And it's probably not fun for them to think, now we have to come back and we've got at least 21 more games that we're going to play. And it's going to be the toughest 21 games we play of the season. And in that moment, when you have all that time to sit back and reflect and they're spending time with their families, maybe it was better to give them another day and have them kind of think about it and get into it. Now, I don't think you have that leeway any other point this season. I think it is going to have to be, kind of snap on guys and get them to be locked in moving forward. But I thought that was interesting from Jerome Tang. And then that's what he led to afterwards. He said, I didn't answer your question, whatever. So if you haven't seen it, go back and watch the full press conference. I think it gives you a lot of context to what we're talking about here. And I think, there are a lot of things that are fair criticisms of Jerome Tang right now. think people need to be easier on him for what took place Monday night afterwards. I thought he was really good there. Fan, what did you make of how he talked on Monday?
Well, I just think he's genuine to who he is. I think he's informed by his faith. I would say that the way I believe lines up pretty close to where he's at, although I would say I'm not as charismatic and outspoken, but I resonate with what he said. And for him, what he reads in the Bible and what he interprets God telling him is what he's going to go with. And, the words could be different. Like some people that are believers might say, God used my assistants to tell me to play Doug instead of just God told me to play Doug. So I think people get caught up with that kind of language. And I think that's where some of the pushback was. But this is who Tang's been the whole time. Like, I think he opened the curtain a little wider than he normally would. And he said that from the start. Hey, I'm going to tell you the truth. And then he goes into what influenced all of what he was talking about. And I think he was genuine in it. And I think he was happy it worked. I think he probably went in not knowing if it would work for sure, but it worked out. And now, and you go back to the Marquise Noel and the shoot your arrow situation. Mm-hmm. It's very similar. He talked with Noel about it. He also said he talked to Doug about it. And so he's, I think he's hoping to catch the same kind of lightning in the bottle player relationship motivation thing again, which is probably the right idea. Like he knows, look, he talks a lot about wanting to impact the guys, make them better young men. I think that's admirable. I think he's of the belief, which a lot of coaches are, that you can do that and you can win at a high level at the same time. Because he knows he's not dumb. Jerome Tang knows he's got to win games to keep his job. Like he's not here just as a charity and a ministry to go 10-20. Like he knows that's not going to fly. He's making too much money, and these guys are making too much money for that to be a case. But he's still going to try to impact these guys and thinks that's the right way to do it. And he thinks he can do both. And I think he thinks he can impact Doug McDaniel and every other player on this team in a positive way. And that's what he's trying to do. So I thought it was genuine. I really appreciated what he said to you because I thought it showed, because when he talked to you after Wichita State, you could tell he was agitated watching that presser. And I think he reflected on that and said, I probably need to behave and react a little bit better when I'm pushed and when things aren't going well. And I thought it was admirable that he said that to you the way he said it during the presser. And I respect that as him showing some humility to him not handling I think we've talked about plenty of times, this staff hasn't handled adversity as well as maybe we thought they would. And maybe they're learning from that as well.
Well, yeah. And the other part of it too is like, that's one of those where I think to own it publicly like that could put more egg on his face too. And so like you take a risk of that because it's not like there was some public outcry that like the 11,000 people or whatever that would have watched his post-game press conference against Wichita State over whatever platform would have been like, oh, the way he treated that guy was terrible. Like all this, like, I don't think there was some outcry to where he was like, I need to do this. He did it. And for him to do it publicly is, I think, him just showing like, I needed to do it in that moment and like make it clear that I screwed up. I don't think he was doing it for show. And I think him doing it that way was much more sincere than him actually doing it when we weren't in the middle of that setting. And so that's also why then I felt like I wanted to go up to him and I wanted to make it clear, like, I want you to know where I'm coming from on this. And like, I don't fault you. And number one, like, you absolutely didn't have to do that because coaches don't have to do that. Like, if the people sitting in the chairs asking them questions can sometimes ask them some pointed questions and they will feel like they're under attack. Like, our work also should not be immune to being under attack from them. Like, they should be fair to do it. So I think that is totally fair in how that went. The other thing I would say is going into something else you said about it. It was how this, you can win and also mold these guys into great guys. And also, you want a team that like the guys love you and respect you. You had all of that in year one. Like that's why he thinks he can do it. You can already see that it was done And I think best case scenario for K-State is actually that the Doug stuff does get turned around. And like, this is the kind of thing that takes that stride to where it's not just turning around Doug for this year, but the guy's got another year of eligibility left. And there's no question that he's a really talented basketball player. So in the perfect world, things get mended there, also to the point where the message gets clear to Doug McDaniel. And this is one of those moments where the message of however Jerome Tang wants to get there. Like, Jerome Tang is not trying to brainwash these guys and say, if you don't have my beliefs, you need to believe them. But he uses it to guide him, and he's going to use it to guide his team. And other guys on the team can use that, and they can translate it to however they want in their own life. Like we talked about, it's clear that year one, Bebe Igiola and Ish Massoud, different religious views than Jerome Tang. Mm-hmm. But those guys and Tang both explain, like, we have different beliefs, but the messages are the same and we can get something out of each other. And that's the kind of thing here where you think Doug McDaniel in this moment should be thinking, okay, this guy probably had a lot of times where he could have and he wanted to quit on me, but he did still have this belief. He gave me this opportunity. Like, what do I need to do to kind of turn things around? So I think that's something to take into consideration. The other thing I was going to say, if you had told us going into that game what was more likely, Doug McDaniel was no longer a part of the team or he was starting that game after Christmas, I think a lot of people would have said he's probably just not coming back. But he did, and it worked out for K-State. Also, one other thing, in the moment, it's gone, so it's probably not as funny now. But, Fan, can I take a guess of what your favorite book of the Bible is?
Sure.
Do you want to guess what my answer is first?
This is good.
Keep in mind, this is going to be a great joke in the moment we were talking about it. Fan's favorite book of the Bible is Numbers.
That's a good one. I'd actually say Ephesians, but Numbers would be up there.
All right. Well, I don't know that Ephesians works out numbers wise for me there, but
numbers works with the bit though.
In the moment, if we had like a different type of lead in, I would have tried to have led you to be like numbers, and then everybody would be like, "Oh, that's pretty good," and I would have been like, "Oh no, Deuteronomy or something,"
When you said what I'd guess, that's kind of where my mind went.
Okay, so. Yeah, that's good. All right, we've talked a lot of basketball, more than I was anticipating, but I think it was good conversation, and we'll see how things end up after the matchup with TCU this weekend on determining everything. Let's move on to football. We're going to have a little bit of fun with our look back at the 2024 season, and we are going to each get to select 3 plays that were our favorites or the top plays from the 2024 K-State football season. Random draw to decide who goes first. And that means Drew Galloway gets to go first because he was the last one in on the show. Fan will go second. I will go third, which no chance I was going to win the first pick because I have to be the first one in here to send out the link for Drew and Fan to get on the call to do this. But that's how we'll go. And then we won't snake this thing. We'll just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I'll just try and win in the margins here on you guys. And
sounds like Mason has no idea. So he wants to be third in all 3 rounds.
No, look, I could tell you right now where I'd start this thing off with, but we'll talk about these and we'll take a moment with each one. We can kind of reflect on that moment, that game, and that'll kind of be our way to reflect on the season. And then we can quickly hit on the bad things and look ahead to 2025 at the end as well. So Drew, you get to lead off our top plays draft of the 2024 K-State football season.
We'll start with the Avery Johnson pass to Jace Brown at Colorado to win the game. I just think that was a big moment, not just for Avery, but for the team. It really, that was the first time that you saw the vertical passing game really, come into full effect. What was that Avery to Jace Brown play? And it was also just big for Avery because that was coming off of an interception that could have effectively lost K-State the game with how that return went. And led to probably the best post game out of all the games this season.
I would agree with that. Yeah, they were pretty they're pretty fired up, I would say. They all gave us a lot of good sound and everything. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
And by the way, in the moment, everybody kind of thought that Colorado game was gross. That ended up being a pretty solid win.
Yeah. Well, I think even by the time we had gotten to that game, I had started to change my tune even a little bit on Colorado. But yes, that I figured that would probably be the top pick. I think that will be the defining play of this season for a lot of people. Is that image and the fact that like it was a great throw, but it was also a really good catch, even better by Jace Brown than the throw was because like they called defensive pass interference on the play, and it's just easy enough to think that he doesn't catch that and it kind of jumbles out of his hands and it falls to the ground. And it's only 15 yards. And then K-State's still having to go down there. But they did that thing in big chunk to DJ Giddens through the air and then the bomb to Jace Brown. And yeah, everything about that play, like the play itself and then everything that came out, really the entire game, because you had Avery Johnson taking the selfie during the game. You've got the picture of Bradley Beal, making the face after Jace Brown scored. Like, it was the total Colorado experience, including the fact that the first person we saw when we walked into Folsom Field was CC Sabathia. So we got all that out of the way.
Skinny now.
Well, CC, there's a certain cereal he really liked that he doesn't eat anymore or something like that, I think. Anyways, Fan, what is your pick here?
It's good. I think, it's maybe recency bias a little bit, but the 65-yard run by Dylan Edwards in the Rate Bowl, which really, if we don't get that play, I don't know that we come back and win that game. And it really showcased kind of who we thought Dylan Edwards was and hopefully who he's going to be next year is that explosive runner, can run inside, even though, it's kind of an off-tackle play that turned inside because of the way it was blocked. But he split the defense, and we haven't seen that kind of explosion from a running back since Deuce Vaughn, really. And even I don't even know if Deuce Vaughn had that kind of speed in open field. So that play to me really defined the bowl game and the future, hopefully, of what we're going to see from K-State football and Dylan Edwards next season.
Yeah, that play, without that play, you don't have a positive springboard into next year. I would totally agree with that. And I go back to, I said it after the game, I think there's a real world where with the two running backs next year, it makes it easier for Connor Riley to call the offense than what he had with DJ Giddens. And it's not DJ Giddens' fault. It's just the way that everything shakes out for K-State. I think personnel-wise, it's a better fit for Edwards and Jackson than it would be with Giddens with this mix. Whereas you look at last year's team, DJ Giddens was the right type of number one guy because of what Will Howard's skill set was, the fact that, you had a passing threat in Ben Sinnott that you would use so routinely, especially as, a tight end in some ways. And then everything else, like this team was needed to be a lot more finesse this year. And it was tough because you had one of the best power type of backs who has a lot of great finesse moves. He doesn't really have the finesse speed though. So we'll go with that. My number one pick here is going to be, it's going to go back to the KU game. There probably are a lot that will come out of this. But I am going to go with the Austin Romaine forced fumble that Brendan Mott recovered as KU had the ball with less than 4 minutes to play, getting close to midfield. K-State was down by 1 point at that stage of the game after they had just turned it over on downs, and they were able to come through and force the turnover, get the ball back. And once again, I mean, KU fans in the moment probably knew, like, oh, here we go again. This is what we were expecting. And for K-State, it was some new life, and they executed and handled it down the stretch. So that is my pick. And that was probably going to be my number 2 on my big board behind the Jace Brown touchdown against Colorado.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That was also on my list. That was actually probably where I was going to go next. So I'm going to pivot to, I believe it was the 5th touchdown of the game that Avery had, where he scrambled for the touchdown against Oklahoma State, where he ends up juking out one of the defenders on the way to the end zone. again, just kind of felt like a defining moment for Avery to have another 5-touchdown game. I mean, I put it in the chat after the Rate Bowl. Avery was 2 slightly better passes from having a 6-touchdown game or a 5-touchdown game with Dylan Edwards having 6. So it was really close there. But that Oklahoma State game, looking back on it, doesn't feel like a pivotal moment in the season. But at the time, it was like, what does Oklahoma State have? And you could make the argument that K-State might have broke Oklahoma State with how that game went.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I'm going to go with the improvised wheel route from Avery to DJ in the Tulane game.
Ooh,
again,
nice.
Kind of a pivotal moment. K-State hadn't played great in the first half of that game, and that was a big score. And as those guys kind of said after the game, it was kind of supposed to be a flat route that they just kind of looked at each other, and DJ kept running, and Avery made the throw for a big score. So that was a big game. Tulane turned out to be a pretty decent non-conference opponent that K-State won on the road, and now all their players are leaving. So too bad for Tulane, but that was a pretty good win for K-State, and that was a pretty good play in that game.
The next spot that I am going to go with mine is also in the Tulane game. And, that play big, but obviously the biggest one to me would be Austin Romaine swiping the ball out of Darian Mintz's hands and Jack Fabris, John's boy, right there and taking it back for a touchdown right in front of me. That was one of those moments that you're like, holy crap, I can't believe that I just saw that. And the Jace Brown moment is there with it. But, even with the Jace Brown one, you're like, the offense has the ball. They kind of have control of this, even though they're losing, but they can dictate it. Tulane was moving the ball again. And you absolutely couldn't have that happen in a tie game. And Austin Romaine, that was the official start of the phenomenal season he had. So Romaine, again, forcing a fumble that turned into points for K-State.
Mason, big Austin Romaine guy in this draft. I have a couple that I'm like debating about in my head. One is kind of a bizarre play because it's like a routine play. So I might save that and have that as my honorable mention at the end.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go with my third one as VJ Payne tracking down Jalen Daniels at the end of the KU game. Just this sheer speed on that play was incredible, and also just sealing the KU win was fun. And just the fact that it was another fumble, even though it went out of bounds.
Yeah, that was great. It was the most everything that KU had struggled with the first 3 months of the season or 2 months of the season. That played out in that game. K-State did it to them, and then after that, KU was right moving forward. That was almost like the Monstars game for K-State, where something transferred in that game. K-State won it, but then all their powers went to KU, and the script kind of flipped there for them. And how it ended up working out. But yes, I would agree. That one was great. It was fun. And that's just like an electric way to end it. You force the turnover. And when you're in the stadium, you can't necessarily always tell, like, where is the guy relative to where the first down marker is? Because in reality, Jalen Daniels really had no chance of picking up a first down on that play.
He ran like 25 yards to get back to the line of scrimmage.
But like for me, I'm in the back of the south end zone, and so he's running away from me. So I'm like, oh my goodness, he's gaining yard after yard after yard, and then you see VJ Payne knocks it loose, and Austin Moore waves the wheat in front of the KU bench, which totally warranted after I think it was the offensive lineman that ended up transferring for KU, kind of cheap shotted him on the way over there where the play was over and Moore was out of bounds and he shoved him to the ground. Yet another missed late hit on KU in that game, which then a week later, a member of the Houston athletic department said to me, oh yeah, we saw the plays that got submitted from that game last week. There were like at least 3 of them that were confirmed as straight up wrong, which I was like, yeah, does not surprise me. After he and I had gotten into it about the officiating in the Houston K-State game, then it was like, oh, is that a Prairie Dunes hat? Common ground. We talked about it, and we were tight from that point. And then he was sharing Big 12 secrets with me. All right, Fan, your last pick here.
Yeah, it's tough. I think I got to go with the DJ Giddens play again, just because, legacy guy, going to go down as one of the K-State's best ever. That 66-yard run against Oklahoma State, I think, was early in the second half, where he broke away. One of the, he showed some breakaway speed on that play. When his longest run of the season, kind of a highlight of his career. I think one of the highlights of his career is that run. So I'm going to go with that run against Oklahoma State.
Broke that one guy's ankles.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised at just how many ankles DJ Giddens breaks for the style that he can play. Yeah, there's a lot to like from DJ Giddens. Since I'm going last, I would throw an honorable mention in there. His touchdown run against Cincinnati was really, really fun and impressive. So that one is good. He broke off to start the second half against KU, a 54-yarder that set K-State up for a big touchdown. And again, those moments you can't take for granted just how fun they are. Another honorable mention that I would throw out there would be the interception that Keenan Garber had against Arizona in that game. That was, you talk about crucial moments in games and sliding doors moments throughout the season. That would be one of those for both of those teams. But I think where I'm going to go, and once again, believe it or not, I'm going all defense here, baby. I am taking Brendan Mott's interception on senior day against Cincinnati, because that, again, is just one of those holy crap moments. You kind of laugh and you're just amazed that it's happening, and it's kind of fun to see. That's the times where sports is just really fun again, no matter what situation you're viewing it in. So I will go with Brendan Mott's interception against Cincinnati. It would have been great if he had made it into the end zone, but still the visual and everything that went with it, fantastic, especially because it was a giant middle finger to Drew Galloway, who basically said that Brendan Mott had sucked going into that game. Am I quoting that right?
That is definitely not what I had. I had said that he only had one sack of the previous 4 games, which was a true statement. So that was actually one of my honorable mentions. So was the Dylan Edwards punt return. The just basic routine play that would have made my list if we did probably a 4th or a 5th round was the Chris Tennant field goal to beat KU.
Yep. Yeah, I considered it if I wanted to be a homer or, somebody that was trying to get the hearts of everybody and be like, he picked all KU stuff. I got to go with it. Thought about it. Definitely thought about it. I'm trying to think of any others. This one, unfortunate that it didn't happen in a win, but probably one of my favorite plays of the season was the touchdown throw that Avery Johnson had late in the half against Houston in the first half. I thought it was probably the most mature ball that Avery Johnson had thrown all year. It was something that we hadn't really seen K-State receivers make a play like that a lot of the time. And it was in that moment I was like, man, it's coming off that stretch of games, Colorado, West Virginia, KU, where I thought Avery Johnson was throwing the ball really well. And I thought, this is, they're going to turn around, because it came off of, was it Purnell or Austin Sami that had forced the fumble that set the touchdown up? And I just kind of thought, this is all coming together. And then it started pouring rain, and that obviously changed the trajectory of the game. And I don't think Avery Johnson was the same throwing the football after that game. So I'll throw that one in there as an honorable mention as well. I'm trying to think of any others that stand out to me that I would look at and say, that those have to be in there. But those are really the ones that I think are impressive. And I think one that would definitely be on here, if the circumstances were different, would be one of the 2 or both of the touchdowns to Jace Brown in the Iowa State game, because both were really impressive for different reasons. One was a 65-yarder when you get the ball back, and it's, again, back in this. Or the first one was a 4th down to the back of the end zone that was really impressive from both Johnson and Brown. So those are the things that should excite people moving forward for next season. Any other honorable mentions that you guys have that we may not be tossing out there?
Yeah, it wouldn't just be one, but early in the year and then even late in the bowl game, the multiple ways of dialing up play action to get the balls to tight ends and H-backs that Riley did throughout the season. Lofton, Oakley, Swanson. I mean, there were just a lot of fun schemes that they used to get the ball to tight ends and H-backs, which I think, again, bodes well for the future and what we're going to see from K-State next year, too.
DJ breaking Shiloh Sanders' ankles.
That's a good one, too. Yeah. Was good.
That's true. The Shiloh Sanders abuse, anything from that game that you have, go for it. And, based on some of the ways K-State people talked, anything Taquan Roberson did in the Colorado game was the highlight of their season, which, again, I'm not devaluing what he did. I thought that was pivotal and he was really important. But, yeah, some people really were hanging on to those moments. Thinking of where this takes us for 2025 for K-State football, what are the expectations, and is this team actually going to be in a position to compete for the Big 12 title? Because they kind of need to be next year. It's year 3 for Avery Johnson. You got to do it. You've got a lot of other stuff going on. I think it needs to come together next year. They're trying to fill the holes that they do have for it. How likely is it? And actually, do you feel better or worse about K-State's chances in 2025 based on what you saw in 2024? And I'll let Fan lead it off here.
I don't know if better is the right word. I feel just as good. I think there's enough. I mean, to me, the key is a returning quarterback. I think there's always value in having a quarterback with experience. And I think that's going to be what, I think probably we put more hope into Avery Johnson going into last year, maybe than what we should have, just based on, he's a first-year starter. He's going to make mistakes. We thought the defense would carry the team more last year. That didn't really happen. The defense was, we didn't really talk about it, but for the most part, not very good in the bowl game. So there's some things you got to fix there going into the next year. The schedule is different. Who knows? It's going to be hard. We thought this year was going to be easier than it ended up being. And with unbalanced schedules, you never know. You have the weird start with Iowa State and Ireland. So, but I still feel like this is a team that should contend with the pieces they have back. It's not like you're starting over. You're getting some good pieces in the portal so far. Hopefully you finish that off. And you have a really good recruiting class. And you have some decent returning pieces as well. So I think the goal should be to play in Arlington next year and to be a college football playoff at least in the picture. So I think that should be the goal for next season.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%. Like, I don't feel any better or worse. I just think that with how the Big 12 is now, it's wide open every single season. It's how can you capitalize on it? And I think that K-State is in a position to capitalize on it. I mean, returning quarterback that has a really high ceiling, returning the leading receiver from the team, which is big. You have 2 really explosive guys in the backfield. And I think that you are hoping that the defense is going to be better than it was this year, even though the defense this year, outside of the bowl game, was pretty solid. Mm-hmm. So I think that they're in position to really contend for the Big 12 again. And there's no reason to not contend with what they are bringing back and just how the league looks. Like, I'm trying to really think about like what my Big 12 ballot is going to be in July. You could make an argument for like 6 teams to be in that number 1 spot. So I think that the league is going to be very highly contested. It's going to be, what does the schedule end up looking like? Do pieces from the portal fit with what they have? I've said this about Texas Tech on the board, and I'm going to say it right now. If you're buying all this talent, why aren't you upgrading at QB too? Because Baron Morton isn't that great. It is never healthy.
Well, but Texas Tech, they, for whatever reason, they fall in love with these quarterbacks that they have to play early on because the other starter is injured, and then they think, oh, this is our guy now. He's going to be a legend here. And it's like, I don't know. Is he? Like, Baron Morton had a pretty mundane season for the amount of times that he had to put the ball in the air. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one. Also, he got sacked 23 times this year.
Yeah, so you kind of look at all that, and the league is just so jumbled that there's no reason that K-State shouldn't contend. They do have to probably win in Ireland, though, to make that run.
Are you are any of you rethinking? And I understand DY and I were the big Baylor lovers this year, but are any of you guys rethinking Baylor after they got down so big against LSU in their bowl game? Because I kind of started to go, man, I did pop off the Dave Veranda back to reality tweet. So fraud watch, I should have done one and he moved him back down. But that's a weird one to me.
Worried a little bit because he's supposed to be a good defensive coach, and Baylor's defense was awful all season.
You mentioned the positive of Jace Brown coming back. I mean, that should not be understated because Jace Brown is easily trending to being the best receiver at K-State since Tyler Lockett. And like the things that he's doing are impressive. And again, K-State tweeted out when it happened in the Rate Bowl, but like he set the sophomore receiving record at K-State. And I know obviously Tyler Lockett's sophomore year, he had a lot other pass catchers on the team that were good, like Chris Harper and some other guys as well. But that still is notable to me. And you bring Jace Brown back, and 800 yards receiving is nothing to sneeze at when you consider how K-State has handled stuff with receivers. I think I'm a little on edge that all the pieces will come together now for K-State. Not as confident as I once was about it. But the more I think about it, I think K-State is probably squarely in the top 3 of teams that you throw in there. And this is without a full roster analysis of teams at this point. It's too early, and we still don't know what some of the portal stuff looks like. But with what K-State brings back, what they've added and what I think they will continue to add, I think it's them. I think Arizona State you'll put up there. Because they don't lose a ton from this team. And really the 2 most important pieces outside of Cam Scadaboo are going to be back next year, and that would be Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson. So you have that.
And Dillingham.
I think you're going to be fine there. And then I think it's just trying to determine who do you want to grab for that third team that you really like and throw in there. Because, I think BYU would probably be the other one that would be like a confirmed top 3 or 4 team. Just they'll have a lot back as well. And we know basketball has a lot of NIL money to use up there. So why wouldn't football? But then, you'll have your wild cards like Baylor. They'll face a better schedule. What will it look like? Iowa State loses a lot from their team. Like Rocco Becht will be back. But, if I was an Iowa State fan, I still really like Rocco Becht. I think he's good. But I would be thinking to myself, I'm a little disappointed that he didn't get better this season. It stayed pretty flat from where it was last year. And that, again, comes with 2 really, really talented receivers. So that'll be one to watch. And then there will be just a bunch of teams that are kind of throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks, or they're probably moving on to a new coach next year. And Texas Tech is probably one of them. At what point does Joey McGuire keep getting away with disappointing 7 or 8 win seasons when you invest so much into a roster? So you can't trust Texas Tech right now because they've had talent these last couple of years that we've gassed up and they've done nothing with it. So what is it going to be that's different this year? I don't know. Baylor is one that will be in there, but then I don't know. So it's fascinating to think about, but I think you're right. K-State does have to win that game in Ireland. That will be the tone setter. And if you do that, then you're probably looking at starting the season 4-0. And then you only have 8 Big 12 games left to worry about.
And so 3 bye weeks.
Yeah. You're going to have an extra bye over everybody, which is helpful. So I think that's a big game for K-State. But even though I know K-State fans will be like, well, Chris Kleiman struggles against Iowa State. He's 2-4 against them. I get it. One of those was also the COVID year, which we know irrelevant, doesn't matter, doesn't count. I've got a lot of evidence to back that up. Like a certain basketball coach that I saw on a quick trip on Christmas Eve buying odd items that won a conference championship in the COVID season and is no longer employed, and buying odd items at a quick trip on Christmas Eve. So yeah, like K-State's in a better position going into next season than Iowa State is. And I know people probably K-State, there are a lot of them that would be irrational and like, no, you're wrong. K-State is in a better position than Iowa State to start next season. That doesn't mean K-State wins. That doesn't mean that K-State, can get away with not doing anything. But that's where K-State's setting up. So that game in Ireland is going to be absolutely massive, because just like the game at the end of the year felt big for K-State and Iowa State, that game still means just as much next year. It's just you're playing it in week 0 instead of week whatever it was this year, 14 or 15. So that's what I've got on that. And we'll talk more K-State football as the offseason rolls on and everybody kind of gets their portal classes figured out, and we'll have a clear-cut idea of roster construction and everything else. So that will do it for us today. A Sunday show on a Thursday. Another Sunday coming up very quickly. We'll have TCU basketball to talk about with K-State going on the road to Fort Worth this weekend, and we've got plenty of other coverage going on as well. You want the latest on the transfer portal in K-State and how they're going to try and get this roster down to 105 to get to the NCAA roster limit, head over to On3, find KStateOnline.com, and become a member if you're not today. For Drew Galloway, KSU fan, I'm Mason Vo. Thanks for watching and listening, and we will be back again tomorrow. Drew and I, we haven't done a recruiting update. We better do one tomorrow, and also preview K-State TCU, and then we'll have everything else you need and are used to for the weekend as well. So we're out of here. See you tomorrow.